Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about An Ice Cold Mother Part 3. Today we're talking about the life of Shonda Vander Ark. When we last left off, we had talked about how the teachers of Timothy's school would realize that Timothy would come to school every single day completely in dirty clothes and stinking and would be extremely hungry. And the teachers would talk to the administration and they would actually allow Timothy to take baths at school. And while he was taking baths, the teachers would then wash his clothes so he could actually be in clean clothes. And the teachers would also take as much food as they could take and feed Timothy as much as they could. It was very apparent that he wasn't being fed, he wasn't being cleaned. And this would not be the worst of the neglect that Timothy would receive, as they would notice that he was very emotionally stunted, and they would see that Timothy took a lot of pride into going to school and he wanted to really do a good job, and he really doted on the teachers mainly because of all the affection and praise that they would give Timothy. And it's said that on many times that he would just emphasize that he wanted to do a good job and he wanted his teachers to be proud of him. And a lot of these times he would be very emotional during these times. So the teachers would actually start going to Eric and Trisha and questioning them about why Timothy was always so dirty, why he was always hungry, and just overall just how he was being treated at home. And during this questioning of the parents, they would actually find some very uncomfortable information and find out that there were rumors going around that not only was this going on, but Timothy was also being rumored to being sexually abused by his other brother, Paul Ferguson. But the investigation really wouldn't find much information about this. It wasn't confirmed nor denied that Paul was being sexual with his brother or abusing him in any way at that time. But it should also be noted that Paul would not have it very easy living at home with Eric, as it is said that Eric would very harshly abuse Paul while he was living there. It's said that on a daily basis, Eric was always physically abusing Paul, and he would find whatever he could to just beat Paul with it, whether it be belts or just anything laying around the house. And this would not be the only thing that Eric would subject Paul to, as many times he would make Paul do wall sits. And not only would he make him do wall sits, but he would make them do them for a long period of time, sometimes for hours. And during these wall sits, he would also make Paul hold large quantities of bottles and cans just to add weight to the wall sits. And it said that he would do wall sits for so long that the next following day he would be in such excruciating pain that it would be extremely painful for him to walk. And during this investigation, they would not find if there was any physical abuse done to Timothy, but Eric and Trisha's response to the teachers' questionings would not be very helpful whatsoever, as a lot of times when the teachers would approach them and ask why Timothy was dirty and why he wasn't being fed, Eric and Trisha would just completely disregard these statements and would say, "We have no idea why Timothy's always dirty. We give him a bath every single day and we give him clean clothes. He just wakes up the next day completely dirty, and we feed him on a regular basis." So suffice to say, the teachers really didn't buy this, and they would try their best to have an investigation done with CPS, but unfortunately nothing was done as far as investigating on Timothy, the abuse or sexual abuse, and nothing really came from it. And you're probably thinking to yourself while all this was going on, where is the mother? Where is Shonda? Well, Shonda was moving on with her life. Not only had she moved on completely with her life, she had no desire to reconnect or talk or just be in her children's lives whatsoever. And shortly after the divorce, she would actually move to Michigan. More specifically, the city of Muskegon, Michigan. And while in Michigan, she would actually meet a man online named Adam Vander Ark. And the two would quickly start a relationship and get married, and they too would have a child. And Shonda would then have a son, and she would name him Gabriel. Not only would Shonda get married and have a new life and have a son, but she would actually begin going back to school, and it said that she would go to school and pursue a law degree. And while in college, she would not have many friends from her fellow classmates, as most of her classmates would refer to Shonda, much like how Paige described Shonda, would say that she was a very hateful person and short-tempered, and most of her classmates would mostly describe Shonda as a bully. But even though Shonda would not make much friends in college, she would actually do very well in school, and she would graduate within the top 7 of her class. And not only would she graduate as the top 7 in her class, she would even go further and pass the bar, which is even more harder to do. And after graduating college, she would actually get a job at a court and would actually be a clerk inside this courtroom. And it's said by 2021, Shonda would actually start reconnecting with her family that she had quit contact with all those years. More specifically, Paul Ferguson. Now, at this time, Paul was about 18 years old, and it's not sure if Paul would tell Shonda about the abuse that Eric was giving him, but he would tell Shonda that living at home with Eric was really, really difficult. And he would even go and tell Shonda that at the time, the job he had was not making much money, and his father was making him pay rent to live at the house. And because he wasn't able to make much money, his father was going to soon be kicking him out of the house, and he had nowhere to go. And he would actually ask Shonda if it was okay if he could move in with her and Adam and Gabriel until he could kind of get onto his feet. And Shonda would actually agree to this, and she would say that she had no problem with Paul moving in, so she would quickly move Paul into her house with her and Adam and Gabriel. And shortly after Paul would move in, it said that Eric Ferguson would make a phone call to Shonda, and he would actually call and tell Shonda that he just couldn't deal with Timothy anymore, and would say that he was just too much responsibility and he was just too much to handle, and he just couldn't deal with him anymore, and would ask Shonda if she had any obligations to not only taking Paul but also Timothy as well, to which Shonda would have no problem with this. And this unfortunately would be the worst thing for Timothy, because if you remember back in 2012, Shonda would have all of her parental rights terminated, and she would not be allowed to be anywhere near her children unsupervised. It would only be allowed to be around them 3 hours a week. And Shonda knew this. And Paul would be a different story, considering that he was 18 years old, so there really wasn't any kind of restrictions about him being around his mother. But Timothy was a different story. He was 15 years old at the time, and he was still a child, and was not legally allowed to be around Shonda unsupervised, especially living with them. And because Shonda knew this, not only would she not enroll him in school in Michigan, but she wouldn't even take him to doctor's visits. And this would also be another problem for Timothy, because now that he wasn't able to go to the doctors, he couldn't get on the various medicines that he needed on a day-to-day basis with his disabilities. Not only that, school was the safe haven for Timothy. That was his safe place. And that's really where he would find just a small fraction of praise and love. And when he would move into Shonda, it is said that all that would just go away. And this would just create more problems. And I really wish this was the worst of it, but unfortunately for Timothy, it gets much, much worse.